I never thought a single conversation would change everything I believed about my relationship. My fiancé and I had been together for 3 years, and I was convinced we were meant to be. That night started like any other weekend gathering at our place. Friends scattered around the house, some playing poker, others watching movies in the living room. I got up from the poker table to grab some snacks and drinks from the kitchen. As I approached, I heard my fiancé's voice drifting from around the corner. She was talking to Sarah, her closest friend, and something made me pause before entering. What I overheard in those few seconds would haunt me for months to come. My fiancé was comparing me to her previous relationship. The words cut deep, not just because of what she said, but because of how certain she sounded. It wasn't just about physical aspects. It was about how she described the connection, the chemistry they had. I stood there, frozen, as she continued talking about how different things were with her ex. I wanted to turn around and pretend I hadn't heard anything, but I knew I couldn't. Instead, I made some noise to announce my presence. Sarah saw me first, and her expression said everything. My fiancé stopped mid-sentence, switching to a casual, "Hey, how's the game going?" I managed a weak smile and grabbed what I needed, retreating to the poker table as quickly as I could. That night, I lay awake while she slept peacefully beside me. My mind kept replaying her words, each repetition feeling like a fresh wound. I cycled through emotions: anger, humiliation, sadness, and back to anger again. The male ego might seem ridiculous to some, but once it's damaged, it's like trying to put together a shattered mirror. You can fix it, but you'll always see the cracks. The following days were a blur. I started avoiding her without really meaning to. When she tried to be intimate, I couldn't respond. The knowledge of what I'd heard created an invisible wall between us. Eventually, she noticed something was wrong and confronted me about it. That's when everything spilled out. I told her what I'd overheard. Her reaction made it worse, first denial, then attempting to explain it away. When she couldn't, she tried to apologize and comfort me, listing all my other qualities. But all I could think about was that I wasn't her first choice. I was the reliable option, the safe choice. What made it harder was knowing their history. When we first met, she was still heartbroken over him. He had ended things to be with someone else, leaving her devastated. I remember our 4th date when she broke down crying about him. I held her while she grieved for another man, telling myself I was just being a good friend. We dated casually for months while she healed, and I kept my distance emotionally, not wanting to push. Then one night, she pulled me into her apartment and told me how much she appreciated my patience. Within 3 months, she was telling me she loved me. I thought we had moved past her ex, that we had built something real and lasting. Now, I wasn't so sure anymore. A month passed, and nothing improved. Every time she touched me, I felt inadequate. When she complimented me, all I could hear was what she'd told Sarah. My fiancé started getting frustrated with my distance, but I couldn't explain how deep the wound went. It wasn't just about physical intimacy. It was about feeling like I would always be second best. That if her ex came back tomorrow, she might realize she was settling for less. I found myself questioning everything. When she talked about how I'd make a great husband or how good a provider I was, it felt like she was listing reasons to stay with me, despite not feeling the same passion she had with him. I started wondering, if I lost my job or got injured, would she still want to be with me? Was I just a friend she had decided to settle for? The breaking point came during a quiet evening at home. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and asked if I didn't love her anymore. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I told her that a large part of me still did, but another part had changed after that night. Something had broken, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. We talked for hours. I tried to explain that if he was better at something specific, something I could work on, I would have done anything to improve. I would have listened to her suggestions, worked on techniques, anything she wanted. But this was different. This was about something I couldn't change, and it was tied to someone who had meant so much to her. She kept trying to reassure me, telling me how much better I was at everything else, how I shouldn't throw away our future over one aspect of our relationship. But her words only made it worse. In my mind, it wasn't just one aspect, it was fundamental to how I viewed our connection. I needed to feel like I was her best in every way that mattered to me. Maybe it wasn't healthy, but it was who I was. The conversation wasn't clean or neat. There were tears, raised voices, and moments of complete silence where we just looked at each other, realizing how far apart we'd grown. She brought up couples counseling, and though I initially refused, her heartbroken expression made me reconsider. I agreed to try, but deep down, I wondered what talking could really change. The truth was already out there. I would never measure up to her memory of him. I moved out the next day, staying with my coworker while I looked for my own place. She went to her sister's house. Our phones were filled with messages from concerned friends and family. The hardest part was facing our families. My parents adored her, and I had no idea how to explain why we were ending things. I couldn't tell them the truth without humiliating both of us, but saying nothing led to worse rumors. Christmas was approaching, and instead of the joint family gatherings we had planned, we were both trying to figure out how to navigate the holidays separately. Every decoration I saw reminded me of the plans we had made, the future we had imagined together. I felt like a failure, not just because I couldn't measure up to her ex, but because I couldn't get past it either. The counseling sessions were harder than I expected. We sat there, trying to talk through our feelings with a stranger, but all I could think about was that fundamental truth. She had shared her most intimate thoughts with a friend, never expecting me to hear them. And those thoughts revealed a reality I couldn't accept. During one session, I tried to help her understand my perspective. I asked her how she would feel if she overheard me telling my friend that she would never understand or comfort me the way my ex did, that she just wasn't as intelligent or compassionate. At first, she dismissed the comparison, but as we talked more, she began to see how deeply her words had wounded me. She admitted that such a comparison would hurt her too, but insisted she wouldn't end a relationship over it. I pointed out that in my scenario, she could work on her education and emotional intelligence, but my situation was different. Her response was silence. The distance between us grew with each passing day. She swung between begging me to reconsider and being angry at what she saw as my stubbornness. I understood her frustration. From her perspective, I was throwing away years of happiness over one overheard conversation. But she couldn't understand that hearing those words had fundamentally changed how I saw myself in our relationship. We tried counseling 3 times. Each session felt like reopening a wound that hadn't healed from the last time. I went in with an open mind, or at least I tried to, but something had shifted inside me that couldn't be shifted back. During our last session, I gave her one final chance to take back what she'd said or explain it differently. Instead, she stood her ground, frustrated by my inability to move past it. The aftermath was messy. Rumors started spreading when I wouldn't give people a clear reason for our breakup. Some assumed she had cheated, which forced me into damage control. I found myself defending the woman who had broken my heart, telling everyone it wasn't what they thought. But how could I explain that we were ending years of love over words spoken in what she thought was a private conversation? Seeing her became impossible. The one time we met to exchange some belongings, it felt like my heart was being ripped out all over again. She had moved from sadness to anger, calling me names I'd never heard her use before. Some I think she made up on the spot. I stood there, taking it all, because maybe I deserved it. Maybe I was throwing away something good because of my own insecurities. The hardest part wasn't the anger or the accusations. It was the love that still remained. There were nights when my finger hovered over her number on my phone, when I wanted nothing more than to call her and say I was wrong, that we could work through this. But then I'd remember her words, and the same inadequacy would wash over me again. I started going to therapy on my own, not because I thought it would save our relationship, that ship had sailed, but because I needed to understand why this had hit me so hard. My self-esteem was at rock bottom, and I needed to rebuild it from scratch. The therapist helped me see that while my reaction might have seemed extreme to others, my feelings were valid. It wasn't just about physical comparisons, It was about feeling like I would always be competing with a ghost from her past. Some friends told me I was being ridiculous, that everyone has a past, that I was throwing away a good thing because of wounded pride. They weren't entirely wrong. I know that whoever I date in the future will have had other relationships, maybe even better ones in some ways. But this was different. This wasn't about her past experiences. It was about hearing her say, years into our relationship, that I would never measure up to what she'd had before. The wedding we'd planned would have been coming up soon. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about the venue we'd picked, the honeymoon we'd planned, the future we'd mapped out together. Those moments still hurt, but they're getting easier to handle. The therapy is helping, teaching me that while I might not have handled everything perfectly, my feelings weren't wrong. She's still angry, from what mutual friends tell me. I understand that anger. I ended something beautiful over words she never meant me to hear. But I couldn't unhear them, and I couldn't unfeel what they made me feel. Some wounds heal clean, leaving barely a scar. Others change you forever, making you question things you never questioned before. I don't know what the future holds. Right now, I'm focusing on rebuilding myself, understanding that my worth isn't determined by comparisons to anyone else. It's a slow process, filled with good days and bad days. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, if I let my insecurities destroy something that could have been beautiful. Other times, I'm certain that staying would have slowly poisoned both of us, me with my constant doubts, her with her growing resentment of those doubts. What I do know is that love isn't always enough. Sometimes it's about timing, sometimes it's about compatibility, and sometimes it's about being able to feel like you're someone's first choice, not their safe option. I may have lost the woman I thought I'd spend my life with, but in the process, I'm learning what I need from a relationship and what I need to be able to give in return.